of the tape.
Alright guys, UFC Fight Night 165 is now in the books, and in the main event, the Korean Zombie makes quick work of Frankie Edgar, earning himself a TKO victory in the first round. It was a quick fight, so there's not a whole lot to talk about in this one. Frankie Edgar comes in with his usual game plan, looking to use the footwork, the head movement, and looking to use his hand speed to get in the pocket, land his strikes, and then get right back out. Shoots in for a takedown at some point that Korean Zombie easily brushes off. Frankie Edgar goes in for a combination, and Korean Zombie lands an uppercut, followed by a couple of hooks up top, which rocks Frankie Edgar, sends him stumbling backwards, and Korean Zombie takes advantage. He gets Frankie Edgar to the mat, starts to land a ground and pound, looking for the finish, and Mark Goddard is giving Frankie Edgar every opportunity possible to survive and stay in this fight. At one point, Korean Zombie actually flattens Frankie Edgar and attempts to finish him off with the ground and pound, but Frankie Edgar able to escape, get back on his feet, and again, Korean Zombie lands another uppercut, followed by a couple of hooks up top. Sends Frankie Edgar back to the mat, follows up with more ground and pound, and Mark Goddard is forced to end the fight right there. Now, two things that were confirmed for me in this fight is that, one, Korean Zombie is definitely getting better, especially in the boxing department. His hands are getting sharper, he's getting better with his timing and his patience. For Frankie Edgar, once again, this confirms to me that his age is starting to catch up with him. His wrestling ability seems to have vanished, and he cannot take a punch like he used to. Now, I know this was a short notice fight, so Frankie had a lot working against him in this one, but it wasn't like he wasn't already training. Again, Frankie had a fight lined up, set to make his bantamweight debut against Corey Sandhagen. And now I think it's safe to say that that fight is completely scrapped. There's no telling what's going to happen with Frankie going forward, but in my opinion, it's time for Frankie Edgar to hang up the gloves. And that's hard to say because Frankie is my #1 favorite fighter of all time. But being as big of a Frankie fan as I am, I just do not want to see him go down the road that he seems to be going down. Now, that being said, we are seeing Jose Aldo have somewhat of a career resurgence. And although he's not consistent with the wins, he's not looking like the washed up fighter that he was at one point. Can Frankie do the same? I wouldn't doubt it. But if he is going to continue the fight, I think he needs to make some major changes in his game, especially with what seems to be a deteriorating chin. He gets hit way too much for somebody that moves around and, moves his head as much as he does. And at this rate, it's only a matter of time before he hits a losing streak that nobody wants to see him on. However, I think even if he did work on his defensive striking, again, his wrestling ability seems to have really diminished as of late. And that wrestling is a big part of what kept him in the top of the division for so long. So while I would love to see Frankie Edgar make a career resurgence, I gotta say that I'm not optimistic about it. Now, before I get into Korean Zombie's future, I want to bring up a side note regarding Mark Goddard. Now, Mark Goddard, I had for a while regarded as the best ref in the business, but I gotta say I'm beginning to see where a lot of these fighters' complaints about him are coming from. In this fight, as I mentioned, he gave Frankie Edgar every opportunity possible to survive Korean Zombie's onslaught and continue to fight, which I have no issue with personally. But during those exchanges, listening to Mark Goddard talking to Frankie Edgar, it almost sounded as if he was actually trying to coach Frankie or plead with him to get out of trouble. And it was just a little weird hearing that coming from a referee who's supposed to be impartial in every bout, especially considering just a week ago, Colby Covington found himself in that exact situation against Kamaru Usman. And Mark Goddard gave Colby very little chance and very little time to survive Usman's onslaught and make it to the end of that round for the decision. It appears that Mark Goddard may be showing some bias in certain fights, and some fighters are starting to catch on, but I could be wrong about that. He may just be aware of Frankie Edgar's ability to survive punishment and turn the fights around in his favor. However, that being said, again, I bring up that as a referee, he should be impartial and treat every fighter the same in every fight. Just my opinion. Again, I could be wrong, and if anybody watching thinks I'm completely off base in that observation, feel free to let me know. However, moving on, Korean Zombie gets another big victory, and this one in his home country of South Korea. Korean Zombie calls out Alexander Volkanovski at the end of the fight, and while Frankie is my favorite fighter of all time, Korean Zombie is another one of my all-time favorites, definitely amongst my top 5, so I really want to see him get that title shot. Now, that being said, things are kind of tricky in the featherweight division right now. The talk going around at the moment is that Max Holloway will actually get the rematch against Alexander Volkanovski and attempt to reclaim his title. And then, of course, if he wins that fight, there will be a trilogy. Now, Korean Zombie also just announced that he's going to need eye surgery to fix some issues with his eyes that he's been having, and that's going to keep him out for a couple of months. He says it's not anything real long term, but he will be inactive for a while. Now, in the meantime, we have two top contenders in Zabit Magomedsharipov and Yair Rodriguez, who aren't booked for a fight at the moment. I said myself in my recap for Zabit's last fight that I would really love to see him and Yair Rodriguez go at it. And with everything going on with Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Korean Zombie, I can pretty much guarantee at this point that that's the fight that they're going to make. And that bout has Fight of the Year potential written all over it. So if either man wins and is able to get the crowd really excited about either of them getting that next title fight, they can definitely make a case to skip Korean Korean Zombie in line. Now we also have Brian Ortega set to make his return at some point next year, and who knows what kind of wrench that's going to throw in the division when he comes back. But if I'm going to make a prediction here, I'm going to say that, again, Yair and Zabit will end up fighting, and I think the winner of that fight will go on to face Korean Zombie for a #1 contendership while everything plays out with Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. Of course, there's always the possibility of injuries, God forbid, but if Volkanovski or Max Holloway have to drop out of that fight, I'm pretty sure the UFC is going to have Korean Zombie on standby, and he'll end up getting a shot a little earlier. Overall, despite the devastating loss for Frankie Edgar, I'm really excited to see what happens next with Korean Zombie. Again, Korean Zombie is one of my all-time favorites, and while Frankie Edgar is a former champion and he's had his time, I really want to see Korean Zombie get another crack at the title while he's still in his prime, because while Frankie Edgar is on a decline, Korean Zombie is only getting better from here. Once again, I want to thank everybody for watching, and I'll see y'all again in the next video.
오늘은 운이 아닙니다. I want Volkanovski.